What's up, YouTube? So today we're going to talk about how to track your cold callers and what numbers to keep them accountable to. But first, Alright YouTube, thanks a lot for joining me today. I appreciate you. My name is Graylan Stewart. If you're new to my channel, please like and subscribe. I definitely appreciate it. So my channel is all about wholesaling real estate, the truths in wholesaling, and what works in my everyday business. I do this full-time, virtually, nationwide. So we are constantly wholesaling deals every single day. So everything I talk about is just real life experiences, and not just fluff or guesses or hope that works. So these are actual things that I implement in my business every day, so I hope you get value out of it. So today's video is about cold calling, but in particular what numbers to keep them accountable to. So someone asked me to do a video on this, to basically tracking KPIs for cold callers. And KPIs, what that is key performance indicators. So basically, what that means is, whatever you're tracking, you can measure. But if you don't measure something, then how do you know, how it's doing for you? So what that really means is, what's the bottom line? How can you really track your ROI if you don't actually have KPIs on different things that you're doing? Whether that's your acquisition reps, your disposition rep, your cold callers, direct mail that you might send, RVMs that you send, anything that you do in your business can be tracked, and that's why it's important. But today we're talking about specifically cold calling. So cold calling, we do about 10 different marketing channels in my business every single month. So, and the reason we do so many is because obviously when we started, we didn't do that many, of course. We just started out doing direct mail was the first thing I did when I very first started. Just a few short years ago, but then I gradually grew into other things. So I always recommend just doing one or two things that you can get really good at, really figure those out well before you move on to something else. But the reason I do 10, I just grew into that over time. But a lot of people are like, well, if something is working really good, then drop the others and go all in on this other thing. But I'm in the belief of I come from a marketing background, so I'm in the belief of whatever's working, I'm going to keep doing it, because if it's not broken, don't fix it. But also those things that are working really well, I double or triple down on those things. But at the same time, if I'm getting deals from cold calls or getting deals from SMS or RVMs or radio or billboards, Facebook ads, Facebook group ads, pay-per-click ads, website SEO ad, if I'm getting deals from all those different things, why would you stop doing it? For example, if I spend a couple $1,000s a month cold calling, even if I don't get a cold calling deal for 2 months, if your average deal size is $15,000 and those 2 months cost me $4,000, I spent $4,000 to get 15, so that's a good deal to me, right? It's still a nice ROI. The goal is to get at least 3 times your investment, and that's more than 3 times my investment. So why wouldn't I keep doing that? I wish it was better, but that's why I do 10 marketing channels still, because they all work. I still get a deal or two here and there from everything that I do, or I wouldn't do it anymore. But I also know that advertising takes time, and you got to be consistent with it, just like you do in anything else. But anyways, I went down a little rabbit hole, but just my 2 cents on that. But anyways, cold calling in general. Okay, so I've got 5 cold callers right now, and the way that I measure them. So first of all, let me kind of break down how I do cold calling. So we have a system that we use that's integrated into my CRM, and that system is where all the callers cold call from, and that's also where my acquisition managers take live calls and call their follow-up leads out of that system as well. Okay, and it is all integrated in my CRM, so it's all in one big housing spot, if you will. But the way that we do it, so I have 5 cold callers, but one of those cold callers has been with me for a while, and she's actually the manager. So the other 4 cold callers report to this one cold calling manager. So she gets paid a little higher than the others. That way everybody's reporting to her, and all I have to do is manage one person. And really, the reason she became manager because she pretty much manages herself. So it's pretty much hands off for me at this point. Obviously, it took a little time to get there. I do have SOPs for my cold callers as well, standard operating procedures to where it gives them step by step on everything that I expect, everything that they have to do, and videos explaining how to do each one of those things. So, but once they are all set up and they're all integrated into the system, they're doing their job. So the way that my cold calling manager manages those other cold callers is based on their dial time. But not only that, so in my system, you have to be. It'll tell you physically, like if you're dialing, like how many dials per hour, you're doing, or how many dials, per week, or you can measure it however long you want to. But we measure by the hour. Simply because they could be on the line and not disposition the phone call, meaning like they weren't interested or we didn't get a hold of them, or they are interested or do not call, all those different things. We have a bunch of different disposition buttons that they have to push to end the call. So they could just, be actually done with the call and not push one of those buttons and just kind of filing their fingernails or doing whatever else they want, if they wanted to. But as soon as they disposition the button, more calls can come in. So to prevent that from happening, obviously, we want them to disposition the call as soon as it ends so they can go on to the next call and it can start ringing again, okay? So we can always tell when we look by the hourly report every week, we can see, like, are they still in that same range that they're typically in, or are they dropping below like the other callers are doing? Because even the manager, she calls as well. So they're all expected to do these same calls. So they're held to, certain calls per hour, because they all work different types of hours. Most of them are 15 to 20 hours each. Just because, I've tried the callers that'll do 40 or 50 hours of calls in a week, and they're just never as productive, because they're kind of burned out after doing it for so many hours in a row. So I try to keep them to 2 or 3 hours per day at a time, just so that it works a little bit better. They're a little fresher typically, and they sound better on the phone. They're not tired. They're not so apt to do fingernail filing or whatever else, playing on Facebook or whatever. So I just have found that they're more productive that way. And it took me a lot of trial and error to figure that out. But so I hold them to a specific call amount per hour, and this would vary, on your business and what kind of system that you use. But also, like during those calls, and I'm kind of referring to some notes here, just because I really looked at it closely before I did this video, just so I can give you accurate numbers, because I want to give you real numbers, not just something I'm making up. So, but I've found that most of them, and I check this probably once every couple of weeks or so. I don't keep it on it real close, because I do have the manager that kind of looks at all that for me just to make sure everybody's on track. But as I said, I looked at it right before this just to make sure I've got accurate numbers for you, so I'm not giving you any fluff, okay? It's just the real stuff. So my callers typically are ranging from 35 to 40 calls per hour. And now that may sound like not very much, or maybe it sounds like a lot to you, I'm not sure. But in my experience, you could probably hand call, 15 to 20 people per hour. Now, what that means is, because 15 or 20, sure, you can actually dial more than that. But if you think about it, sometimes you're going to end up having conversations with some of those. Some of them won't answer at all, and you're leaving a voicemail. Or some of them just flat won't answer, you're hanging up and going to the next one. So that's why I say usually you can probably do 15 to 20 actual manual dials on your phone, on your own, in between getting a hold of people or not. So they're held to this 35 to 40 an hour, because keep in mind, they'll have people that don't answer at all and might ring for 10 or 15 times. And also you have to have time, because the ringer is going until the call picks up again. So sometimes that takes, up to a minute or so to get connected for another call. And sometimes it's within a few seconds. But all those things come into play. That's why it might sound a little bit low, 35 to 40 calls. when you can physically dial 15 to 20. But you got to account for, time it takes to ring by the time they answer it, the uncontacted people that just rings and rings forever, or the ones you actually have a conversation with. Some conversations are longer than others. The ones that maybe are cussing you out and telling you don't call them again, take you off the call list or whatever. So all those things come into play. So you got to think about all those. So that's a number that we use, and that could be different in different businesses, but that's what we've used. I've been cold calling pretty much since I started. I started about month 3 after I got going wholesaling. So I've been doing it for close to 3 years now. And this is what I found has worked best over these last several months. Like I said, so I do have one manager cold caller and 4 others that report to her. So there's 5 total. Most of them call 15 to 20 hours per week. We do call 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. typically Monday through Friday, and also Saturdays. We'll do like a 10 to 4, 10 to 2, something like that. Just depends. And some of them, they get, just like any other person, they'll get sick here and there. But other callers are really good. Like my manager, she's really good about covering those hours. So if somebody's missing or their power's down or they're sick or what have you, usually all those hours are filled. So usually we have somebody on the phone, at least one person from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. weekdays, and usually at least from 10 to 2 on Saturdays. So all those hours are always covered typically, at least by one. And a lot of those are doubled up hours in some cases. So, but anyway, so out of those 35 calls that they're getting per hour, so like I said, most of them are working 15 to 20 hours per week. So in a month span, that comes out to, they end up doing around 2,500 calls or so during that month. And so we have 2 different, so the leads that we have, they're not allowed to send that into our system. Like they disposition it 2 ways that go into our actual CRM. One of them is valid, meaning yes, it's a valid person, it is their phone number, and they are willing to at least hear a cash offer. And one of them is valid interested. So valid interested in my system means yes, it's a valid person, yes, they do want a cash offer, and yes, they're very interested in hearing that offer. So but they do have to meet some of these criteria, like they at least got to give us the condition or their price or maybe a timeline that they need to close, and they've got to have motivation, of course. So they've got to hit at least 2 or 3 of those if they're hitting valid interested, otherwise just valid. So we really vet those leads that go into our system because we don't want just junk in there. We don't want to waste our time because my acquisition managers take these calls personally. We don't have lead manager or anything like that because we want our top closers actually taking the calls, every time if possible. So, they can live transfer over if they're available. If they're not available, it'll just show up in our queue as a valid interested lead or a valid lead, to where the acquisition manager that's available can just call them back ASAP. So anyways, out of those 2,500 or so calls a month, which is around 35 calls to 40 calls per hour typically, that usually gives us about 10 solid leads. And usually that's about half and half. Half of them are just valid, half of them may be valid interested. And usually we have a few more, valid interested than valid overall. And like I said, the valid interested is obviously a lot better lead. But we've done deals just from the valid ones. They're just interested in a cash offer, and they didn't really get that far with them. So, but out of those 10 per month, it doesn't even come up to one full deal per rep. So it's about a half a deal on average. Just being straight up with you, because last month I just pulled last month for March of 2021. So out of the 4, we only had 4 callers at that time. We just hired the 5th one just about a week ago. So I only measured those 4 because they were all there the full month. We ended up getting 2 deals out of all of that. They averaged about 2,500 calls each, around 35 to 40 calls per hour. And it was close to 10 or so, 8 to 10 leads between valid and valid interested per rep. And we got 2 deals out of that. So that's half a deal per rep, if you want to look at it that way. But 2 deals, and like I said, most of them, they average about $7 an hour is what we've paid. And I've tried the $3 ones and the $5 ones. They never really pan out. Pay them a little bit more. Usually get what you pay for. So they do average around $7 a month. Let me just see what that comes up to. So if they're averaging 15, let's just say they average 18 hours a week times 4, that's 72 in a week times 4, which is 288 hours times 7. So that's about $2,000. That's about what I pay. So $2,000 in a month time, and our average assignment fee at the first quarter was about $15,000. So we did 2 deals out of that 1 month that cost us $2,000 of calling, but we made $30,000 off of that. So as you can see, that's a pretty big ROI. So if I would have just got at least, 1 deal out of that, I would have been happy, So we got 2 out of it, which is awesome. And there are some months we get 0, and I still keep going. It doesn't bother me because I know when I look at it in a 12-month period, and that's really how you have to look at your advertising over a 12-month period to really measure it and see what you're really getting out of it. And that's exactly why I keep doing all the different channels that I do, because not every month do I get a deal from SMS, but it's so cheap. I get one like every other month, so that's worth it to me, right? Same thing with RVMs. We probably get 1 deal a month from RVMs, but it's super cheap. So why would I not keep doing that? And those things also, another reason besides the ROI, another reason I keep doing those, because it's really hands off. Once you set them all up in your system, it pretty much runs on its own. That's why I love those kind of channels. The cold calls are pretty much running by themselves. All we have to do is upload the list, which we have so many records, 120,000 or so records just in one area. It's hard to ever even run out of that, because we don't call a ton. I don't have a big 15 people team that's calling 40 hours a week, like some people do. Ours are it's just 5 callers calling 15 to 20 hours a week each. So the leads last a long time. So I like it because it's hands off, like cold calling, the SMS, RVM, especially those 3 are really hands off. And radio, any kind of radio or TV or billboards, that stuff is hands off too, because you kind of just set it and forget it. So that's why I love all those channels. But same thing with Facebook and PPC. Like most of them are hands off. But direct mail, I know you can automate that a little bit too, but to really get a good grip on it, you have to kind of keep your hand on that a little bit better and closer. So that's a little less automated to me. I know people that do automate it, but if you really want to get the best bang for your buck, I feel that you have to kind of keep your hand on that a little tighter. But anyways, so hopefully that all makes sense. That's basic KPIs for my cold callers that we use in our business every day. So around 2,500 calls in a month is typically what they're doing, which equates to close to 35 to 40 per hour. And we usually get about 10 leads out of that, in that given month. So that's around, 2 or 3 leads a week per rep, which isn't a ton, but at the same time, we don't just let anything into our system, because a lot of people will be like, if it's a valid number and, we talk to them or whatever, blah, 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 they'll put it in their system. Everything that comes into my Podio system is super vetted. So that's exactly why every 15 leads into my system turns into a deal. It's because it's only solid leads. We don't let junk in there. It's super vetted before it even gets into my system. And I would encourage you to do the same, that way it's just streamlined a lot easier. And we know that these are just good leads in my group. And that feels better to the acquisition managers too, because they know, how hard we vet each one of these calls. Each one of everything else that goes into our system is highly vetted. Even SMS, all the replies, none of that goes into the main Podio acquisition system. We have a separate Podio that we do all the replies to. So it's got to be vetted through that system before it even goes into our main Podio acquisition system. So anyways, I kind of went on a rant there, but hopefully that helps you out. It makes a little bit more sense on how to track KPIs for your cold callers. So anyways, I hope you got value from this. I definitely appreciate you sticking around this long. Please give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate that. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll see you in future videos. Thanks a lot.